Good morning. It's 7:03. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. It's time to rise and freedom. Oh boy, we got a spicy show for you today. A writer for The Atlantic wrote a piece calling for a general amnesty of wrongs committed during the pandemic. The response from right-wingers was predictably to throw it back in their face. But I'm of a different mind, and I think an important conversation can be had right now that we shouldn't throw away so lightly. And then at 7:30 this morning, Adam Coleman joins me to discuss his transition from Democrat to a conservative and how coming into contact with conservatives for the first time changed his mind about them. And at 8 a.m., why libertarians are voting no on pot legalization in Missouri. Camelia Peterson joins me at 8 a.m. to discuss why, and I'll get her take on the Atlantic piece as well. Plus, at 8:30 this morning, Jon Miltimore from the Foundation for Economic Education joins me to talk about the age-old question. If you could time travel to kill baby Hitler, would you? All that and more on the Wake Up America show at wakeupamerica.show.com. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're glad to have you here. It's a YouTube blitz. We're going to continue to ask our friends, followers, and listeners to watch the show on YouTube. So far, the YouTube blitz has been going great. We're trying to push ourselves to get to monetization. So just so you understand kind of like why I'm doing this, real quick, house cleaning before we get to the Atlantic article. So YouTube is really one of the only platforms that you can get monetized on in terms of YouTube for, doing what I'm doing right now. So in order to help grow the show, bring in a new revenue stream, which, wouldn't be a whole lot, but, the more that we get, the better. And so in order to help support the show, all you have to do, if you're watching it on YouTube, just, watch it on YouTube, like the show on YouTube, share the show on YouTube. And that way, once we get to 4,000 watch hours, we'll start to earn a little bit of revenue. It probably, again, won't be a whole lot, but we want to continue to add new ways to make money so that the show can grow and that we can hire employees and we can continue to have a great show in the mornings. So at the moment right now, we're at 2,894 public watch hours. We're trying to get ourselves to 4,000 public watch hours. So 12,106 more to go. Or 1,206. Not so great at math, doing some math so early in the morning. But we're doing great. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And thank you so much for watching us over on YouTube. I really appreciate that. Hello, why are you up at 5 a.m.? I have no idea, Susan Biggs, but we're certainly grateful to have you here. Good morning, Melissa Roysden. Duke Chastain, glad to have you here, as well as Matt Unruly and Steffi. Good morning, good morning. All right, so let's hit the news. So The Atlantic published a piece yesterday that has the right up in arms, and certainly it's got a lot of people angry at me yesterday for suggesting that we ought to at least have a conversation about a pandemic amnesty. Emily Oster published this piece yesterday where she says we need to forgive one another for what we did and said when we were in the dark about COVID. Now, broad strokes, I like this idea. Broad strokes, I think it's a good idea. As a matter of fact, by saying that it's a good idea for us, not necessarily to have an amnesty, but let's have a conversation about amnesty, it immediately was met with a lot of anger when I suggested that we should. And so I tweeted this morning, about an hour ago, this question: do you want justice or revenge? My friend Camelia Peterson, who's going to be on the show this morning at 8 a.m., I'll have her explain this in more detail. She says that I think a lot of people like revenge because it is only limited by what you subjectively feel. Justice, on the other hand, requires more work to determine what that actually means and how to apply it. You see, for me, the difference between justice and revenge is that justice is handed down by a jury of your peers. Revenge is handed down by the same amount of people through a lynching. And to me, that's the difference between justice and revenge. So, Tanner Kemna, my friend over at Kemna Collision Repair, asked a similar question this morning when he says, what's the difference? And I said that it's the difference between the Treaty of Versailles and the Marshall Plan. And for those who are, I won't say historically illiterate, but for those who don't really know the back history, of course, after World War I, the world decided to wreak revenge on Germany, which led to World War II. And after World War II, the lesson that was learned was that we should rebuild our opponents after we have defeated them in battle. And the Marshall Plan was one of the greatest successes in American government history. I don't like to give the government, credit where it's due, but credit where it's due. The Marshall Plan was a much smarter move to rebuild Europe and Japan than it was to wreak revenge, as we attempted to do after World War I. It just came around and bit us in the butt. And there are people who agree with me and disagree with me on this subject this morning. I'd love to hear what you think about it. Send me a text at 573-319-1586. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic again. 573-319-1586. Let's get into this article from The Atlantic. This was published October 31st, just yesterday. She says that in April of 2020, with nothing else to do, my family took an enormous number of hikes. We all wore cloth masks that I made myself. We had a family hand signal, which the person in the front would use if someone was approaching on the trail and we needed to put on our masks. I know what you're thinking right now. You're shaking your heads back and forth. Well, let me just shake them for you too, because, I never did anything quite that stupid. She said, once another child got too close to my then 4-year-old son on a bridge, he yelled at her, "Social distancing." These precautions were totally misguided. Well, see, she admits this, right? So I think that this is a good sign, honestly, because in terms of the mentality, I want peace. I know that many people want war, but I would like to see peace. And what's ironic to me is that so many on the right are so quick to say, well, we want peace between Russia and Ukraine, but they won't call for peace here in the United States between Republicans and Democrats or between the left and the right. No, for them, it's total war and total annihilation. So why would you call for peace over there but not want to apply those same principles here? I mean, wouldn't it be nice to live in peace here in the United States with, people that we even disagree with on some fundamental issues? I understand that this is not popular for me to have this conversation, but I think that I should get a lot of credibility for saying this, and I'll tell you why, not to just pat myself on the back. If you're watching the show live, you can see right here, holding up, this is an award that I was granted by Missouri Public Health Association. It says, for outstanding contributions to public health in Missouri. Now, this is from an institution that is put together by the many assorted, varied public health organizations in the state of Missouri who granted me this award for my coverage of the pandemic. And during the pandemic, for those of you who may not have listened to my radio program at the time, I was very harshly critical of public health authorities in the state of Missouri, very critical of public health authorities and the measures they took, especially specifically in the very beginning of the pandemic, because of the push for lockdowns, because of the push for, mask mandates and the closures of schools. Harshly critical. But the reason why I think that this award was granted to me was not just because I held their people to the fire, but I also held our people's side to the fire. I was objective when I came to the coverage of the pandemic. And I think that that's what people recognized. Not only did I stand outside the Capitol here in Jefferson City, Missouri, where this show is being broadcast from, not only did I stand outside the Capitol and protest against the closures of businesses here in the state of Missouri. I stood for the liberty of business owners to remain open, but I also called out the people in Southwest Missouri in Branson who were trying to sell silver iodine that contained textile bleach to people as a miracle cure for COVID-19. And I think the problem is that while I think that Republicans, right-wingers, libertarians, conservatives broadly were more correct in the pandemic in the way that they handled things, it's not to say that there wasn't some misinformation and disinformation on both sides, because there absolutely was. Was what the left was doing worse? Yes, absolutely. Should there be justice for this, for what the left has done? Yes, absolutely. Should there be, should we just forget it and move on and let bygones be bygones? I don't think so. But the fact that the left is calling for this, amnesty, I honestly believe is a good sign, because it shows that while they tried so hard to squash us and squelch us, call us grandma killers and science deniers, we savaged them in return. So much so that they are now calling, some of them are calling for amnesty. Some of them still call us Nazis on a daily basis. Some of them still, semi-fascist and things like that. And for those people, there should be no quarter. But for people like this, but for people who are calling for mercy, I think that mercy, at least if you're a Christian, it's supposed to be a Christian ideal. I'm not a Christian, but I do believe in the principle and the concept of mercy. And that's simply because of the lessons of World War I and World War II. The difference between, again, the Treaty of Versailles and the Marshall Plan. So this author continues on talking about how her precautions were totally misguided. Well, good. At least she learns it, right? This is a person, I think, who has learned her lesson. She says that in April of 2020, no one got the coronavirus from passing someone else hiking. Duh. We can joke about it because I think it is funny, because the fact of the matter is that was always stupid. I mean, how could you know anything about science and think that you're going to get an infectious respiratory disease from someone while you're passing them on a hiking trail? She says, our cloth masks made out of old bandanas wouldn't have done anything anyway, but the thing is, we didn't know. I mean, yeah, there was no scientific double-blind testing paper that could have shown that, but I mean, you could have known that at the time, lady. I mean, there's nothing wrong with tut-tutting and, someone comes to you for mercy and saying, hey, you need to learn your lesson. But I think, that this is good that she's saying this. She says, I've been reflecting on this lack of knowledge thanks to a class that she's teaching at Brown University on COVID. She says they've spent several lectures reliving the first year of the pandemic, discussing the many important choices that they've had to make under conditions of tremendous uncertainty. Some of those choices turned out to be better than others. To take an example close to my own work, there is emerging, if not universal, consensus that schools in the United States were closed for too long. Duh. The health risks of in-school spread were relatively low, yeah, whereas the cost to students' well-being and educational progress were high. The latest figures on learning loss are alarming, but in spring and summer of 2020, we had only glimmers of information. Reasonable people who cared about children and teachers, advocated on both sides of the reopening debate. Yes, and I was in favor of, I've always been in favor of closing public schools entirely and completely anyway. But I mean, so I'm not really the best person to judge on this one, simply because my view on this one has been decidedly much different. But I'm really curious to hear what you think about this, and I'm going to check your comments over on the live stream. Looks like we've got a new commenter, Master Voltaire, who's over on Twitch this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Kenneth Slayer's got a really good point of view. I'm going to have to read those comments when we get back, but you can text him as well at 573-319-1586. We'll continue this conversation when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Morning again in America. Our country is prouder and stronger and better.
I like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today.
Fire.
Your printing company stinks. They charge you too much money and they don't love America enough. We've got the solution. Patriot Printing USA. Whether you're running for office, saving souls, or just need business cards that will get you the new job you've been looking for, Patriot Printing USA has got you covered with the best prices around. Palm cards, brochures, bumper stickers, door hangers, you name it, we've got it. PatriotPrintingUSA.com. That's PatriotPrintingUSA.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Displayed proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.
Good morning at 7:21. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. Glad to have you here. Thanks so much for tuning in. Wow, this conversation has really got people fired up. People are angry this morning. That's why I think it's a great topic. This whole concept of a general pandemic amnesty and the fact that I'm willing to have this conversation, it's really got people angry. Man, somebody said this morning that I said when I said that we should have this conversation, they go, what do they say? Lulberts, something about Lulberts. I wish my voice was as strong as I want to be able to speak. I want to speak much more strongly than I can, but my voice is so tired. They said the Lulberts can't save you. That's slang for libertarians. You cannot live and let live out of this. Rawr. And these people who are always like these, they talk so tough online. They never have like a picture. They never show who they are. They're always so tough, talking so tough behind their avatars. They'll be arguing about semantics and distinctions without differences while being loaded onto trains headed for gulags. Completely unserious people interested only in monetizing their unseriousness. What difference if your gulag says albeit mocked free versus theirs with a hammer and sickle? See, I don't give in to fascists any more than I give in to commies. No, I think I'll just stay a Lulbertarian. Better to be a Lulbertarian fighting against the Nazis and the commies. I'd rather fight a war on two fronts than give in to evil. Do not give in to evil, but proceed ever more boldly against it. Do you want justice or do you want revenge? We're having a good conversation this morning about an article that was written in the Atlantic by an economist by the name of Emily Oster, where she says that we should declare a pandemic amnesty. She says we need to forgive one another for what we did when we were in the dark about COVID-19. She says that she admits that they were wrong about many things, including one of the most important things. And I think this is why it's worthwhile to have this discussion and for us to at least humor the left in having a discussion on this, because when you admit such a great wrong as closing down the schools was in many ways and delaying the educational process for so many young people, I think that admits a lot. I think that admits quite a lot. And I never drank the Kool-Aid entirely from the right when it came to their positions on vaccines. And I never drank the Kool-Aid from the left on vaccines either in this situation. So I think that makes me a very good objective judge of the relative wrongs that were committed by both sides during the pandemic. Too many people who are tribalists think that there was nothing wrong that we did on our side. We were completely blameless, but that's not true. There were plenty of wrongs that were committed on our side. I had to go on the radio and explain to people why they should not be injecting or drinking bleach. Right, that was a real thing, and there were people who had to call poison control hotlines because they were actually ingesting chlorine dioxide, I believe. There were like 30 poison control calls. Now you might say that that's not very many people, and that may be, you're like, that's the fringes of our people. That's right. That's true. But that deserves to be addressed, right? It's not as if misinformation was entirely the purveyed by one side or the other, right? There's plenty of stupidity to go around. Were the wrongs that were committed by the left far greater and far more egregious? Yes, I agree with you. But the fact that it wasn't completely entirely one-sided leads me to believe that it's a good idea for us to have this kind of a conversation. And when they call for amnesty, it's a good idea to have talks, to have a conversation, just like we want Russia and Ukraine to have a conversation about ending their hot war. We should have a conversation about ending our Cold War here in the United States. One of the things that she brings up in this article in The Atlantic is she says, another example here, when the vaccines came out, we lacked definitive data on the relative efficacies of the Johnson & Johnson shot versus the mRNA options from Pfizer and Moderna. The mRNA vaccines have won out. But at the time, many people in public health were either neutral or expressed a Johnson & Johnson preference. This misstep wasn't nefarious. It was the result of uncertainty. Now, I know a lot of my listeners and followers are you're not a believer in any of the vaccines when it comes to COVID-19. Of course, there have been many different forms of the vaccine, including both the mRNA form as well as the Johnson & Johnson form, which is a more traditional type of vaccine. But I don't think that that's neither here nor there in this conversation with what she's bringing up here, because amongst the scientific community, including conservative doctors like Bob Onder, there is an argument for a certain demographic of the population to have a vaccination against COVID-19, and the risks outweigh or the benefits outweigh the risks, and at least according to Senator and Dr. Bob Onder of Missouri, who, no offense, is an actual doctor of a respiratory doctor, and in whose opinion I will listen much more to people than who got their education for medicine on the internet. Yeah, say what you will, but I'm just, I'm going to go with the expert on that one because, again, an actual doctor and an actual conservative. If they were a doctor and they were like Anthony Fauci, then I would be more skeptical. But the fact that Dr. Bob Onder never advocated for mandatory vaccinations, and the fact that he thinks that it's a bad idea for young people, especially young men, to take the vaccine, which is what I've been able to glean from my studies, but that it is something that if you're an advanced age or you have what do you call them when you have other diseases, right? It might be a good idea for you to do it if you're of a certain demographic. See, for all the stories of people who come out and say, well, my family member died of myocarditis or the blood clot or what have you, there are plenty of stories of people who died from COVID-19 who didn't get the shot because they had read online that, the shot might give them myocarditis or what have you. But now that they're dead, they might have probably wished that they had taken the opportunity to at least have a shot at a shot at least a shot at life. So you have to consider the both sides of that one. I mean, that was a scenario with my aunt who died from COVID-19 because she refused to get a vaccine. She probably, if she had known that it was going to kill her, probably would have liked to have had the opportunity. You can send a text at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. Little D Trucking sent in a text message this morning and said that Fauci, Birx, Pence, and Kushner need to be tried for what they did and then publicly executed. Okay, not sure about that. But should they go to jail? Probably. At least Fauci for sure. Another listener texted in this morning and says, please ask the lawyers why they did this. I think it looks like something to do with Amendment 2 or Amendment 3. This is for the marijuana question on the ballot in Missouri. We're going to talk to Camelia Peterson about that at 8:09, so I will get into that a little bit more. Another listener texted in from 917 and said, I doubt accountability will come through conventional means as the authorities are the ones in the wrong. I'm not saying we need Ceausescu-style trials. That's a good reference. But I believe a harsh reckoning is due to those who oppressed us during the pandemic by whatever means are necessary. Revenge, justice, I'll take accountability. I completely agree with you there, and I think that's a really good point. I like that, and that's really, I think, the path that we need to be going down. Another listener texted in and says, it said over on the live stream that anyone who pushed for mandates deserves the gulag. Soviet theme intensifies, says Tony Allegra. Very funny. Denise A. Pricewell says, Austin, many died of COVID due to wrong treatment protocols. Yes, absolutely. That's true. It's funny, when I say something, people for some reason will reject it. What's funny to me is that I'm essentially many times regurgitating the views that I've heard from Thomas Sowell or Ron Paul. For example, when it comes to vaccines, there were many people on the right who had already determined that the COVID vaccine didn't work before the vaccine had come out. They also happen to believe that all of the other vaccines don't work as well, which I find quite interesting. But Thomas Sowell was interviewed by Roger Ailes, who was the president of Fox News for a time, and Roger Ailes was asking Thomas Sowell about this idea of trade-offs, the concept of trade-offs, which I think very much applies to the concept of vaccination. The idea of trade-offs, Thomas Sowell brought up the polio vaccine. And when he brought up the polio vaccine, he said that there were people who, in receiving the polio vaccination, were actually harmed by the polio vaccine. And he says that in that understanding that more people were benefited from receiving the vaccine than were harmed by the vaccine, he says that therein lies the concept of there are no solutions to our problems, only trade-offs. And that's what the left and communists and socialists don't understand. And to a certain extent, I think even conservatives don't understand, but specifically those who are anti-vaxxers, that there are no solutions to COVID-19. Only trade-offs. So if someone were to die of myocarditis, as Dr. and Senator Robert Onder has said, that there are serious threats to young people who take COVID-19 vaccines, and one of those includes blood clots and myocarditis. Man, I'm so going to get in trouble for this on social media. But in that idea, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. So the question is, are the trade-offs worth the negative impacts of it? And again, this is Thomas Sowell talking about the polio vaccine, and I do think that it applies to this. The question is, do we have enough data now to determine whether or not the vaccine helps more than it harms? And therein, I think, really is the rub. Let's talk to Adam Coleman. I'm going to get him on the show about his journey from Democrat to conservative. We'll be back on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that
God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here. And we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Austin's wife. I want to thank you all for watching the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. This show has been a huge venture for our family, so we would love it if you could join us.
I believe in liberty, and I believe in Austin's ability to spread the ideas of liberty. Do you?
I want to ask you today to join Peterson's Patriots with a pledge of $17.76 a month. Help us to stay cancel-proof so we can spread the message of limited government across the country. I joined Peterson's Patriots myself, just in a little different way. Visit wakeupAmericaShow.com/support and make your pledge today.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
Speaker Pelosi's husband, Paul, made a big investment in chips just before Congress votes on a bill that would give $52 billion in subsidies and tax credits to the chip industry.
Over the course of your career, has your husband ever made a stock purchase or sale based on information he received from you?
No.
And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back. Do not come. Do not come.
Have you ever received a royalty payment from a company that you later oversaw money going to that company?
I don't know as a fact, but I doubt it.
Well, here's the thing is, why don't you let us know?
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. It's 7:36, and you're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. Well, my next guest writes at the New York Post that the mainstream media lied to me about conservatives. He says that there was a time when I perceived the world of politics through a deceptive lens that our mainstream media optimist provided me. He used to be a Democrat. Now he's a very popular conservative online. His name is Adam Coleman. He's the founder of Wrong Speak Publications. He's an author and a speaker, and he joins us right now. Good morning, Adam. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We're glad to have you here.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I guess tell us a little bit about your journey. You started out as a Democrat, but you say that you didn't really have any conservative friends. So maybe you should just start there.
Yeah, I think it mostly has to do with location. I primarily lived in northern to central New Jersey, generally rather blue, generally liberal, not super liberal, but generally liberal. And as far as like discussing politics, I know it's more normal to discuss politics these days openly. But even personally, when I would discuss politics with people, everybody was a Democrat. So my view of what it meant to be a conservative or Republican basically came from media filtering. It didn't come from a one-on-one interaction. I probably knew, if I really think about it, maybe 2 Republicans that I had some sort of interaction with throughout my adult life before I started actually seeking out conversations with conservatives, being around conservatives, and like I said in the article, actually going to a conservative conference just to hear what they had to say. And my viewpoint is that I am socially conservative these days. And it seems like it's a conservative viewpoint when you say, hey, I just don't want my kids sexualized, and I don't think we should mutilate children, which is a shame. I thought that was something that we all used to agree on. But yeah, I guess if that's one of those standards, then I'm a social conservative today. Politically, I'm an independent, and I just voted for Republican for the first time in my life on Sunday.
Wow. If you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Adam Coleman. He's an author and a writer. His new piece in the New York Post talks about how he transitioned from a Democrat to a conservative. And his latest Substack article talks about how he voted Republican for the first time in his life. So do you want to summarize that for us, why you decided to vote Republican, Adam?
I touched on it with a couple things. The sexualization of children, exposing them to sexual content in schools, and how when parents started speaking up about it, the media started slandering them as being white supremacists and bigots. And it's like, no, it doesn't matter that it's LGBT or not. You're discussing sexuality. You're having very explicit content, so much so that when parents would read stuff that in these books at the school board, they would cut them off for being explicit. And I'm watching this and I'm like, why are the Democrats making this a divisive issue? And it's because the Democrats have become socially progressive. Politically, they teeter back and forth with, making it sound like they're catering to progressives, but they really aren't. They're establishment. They're establishment types, but socially, they want to sound progressive. And so they will do everything possible to signal that this is fine, it's acceptance, yes. And I said the other day, when Joe Biden sat down and basically advocated for the mutilation of children on television in his own words, I said, oh, that's the death knell right there. Like that's it for the Democrats. Like that is not a popular position whatsoever. And they've gone so far left that I can't support it. I've actually just stopped supporting them a while ago, but this is the first opportunity. I just decided to actually go to the polls and vote Republican, because they're the only ones that have the most common sense. Like, hey, the very basic thing that we used to not even dispute, we didn't even talk about it because it's so basic. You don't sexualize children and you don't advocate to mutilate them. They've gone so far to the left that the Republicans seem like the most reasonable choice. And I can't, like, what else am I supposed to do?
If you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Adam Coleman. He's an author and a writer. He's talking about what it was like to come into contact with conservatives for the first time in his life and why he voted Republican for the first time in his life. If you have a question, you can send us in a text at 573-319-1586. Now, Adam, this is this might be a little bit of a difficult question here, but I mean, to my knowledge and understanding, the African American community is, largely socially conservative because the African American community is largely Christian. So was it the issue of the mutilation of children that really took it too far? Because, there are plenty of African Americans who are, happily Democrat. They go to church on Sunday, but they're not going to vote Democrat this fall because they don't believe that the Republican Party has their best interests at heart. They might not feel as comfortable about the sexualization of children, but it's not going to be the kind of thing that's going to have them make such a radical transition in their voting patterns. Is what you're doing here, voting Republican, would you say that you're an anomaly, or would you say that more people, in the Black community are starting to see these and make these kinds of changes?
Unfortunately, I still think I'm an anomaly, but I think there are more anomalies that are out there. I think there are more people like myself, I talk to them all the time, who are waking up and saying, whether it's the sexualization of children or other things, they're saying something's not right here. And, the Republican Party, at the very least, is not doing those things. And in some cases, doing things to prevent it from happening, which is why I support Ron DeSantis, because he's the only one, I don't want to say only one, but he's the biggest when it comes to actually attacking, people like to say the culture war stuff, but it actually means something to some of these people. To some of these parents, yes, having this content in schools, you know what? We should have some sort of board. We should have some sort of limitation when it comes to it, because we wouldn't say Playboy should be in schools. Why? Because we know it's explicit content. So that means that we're not banning that book just to ban books. We're banning that book because we want to prevent children from being stuff that's inappropriate. And I think that more Black Americans are seeing this, but unfortunately, the largest hurdle that Republicans will ever have is the narrative that all Republicans and conservatives are racist.
This is a good conversation that we're having with Adam Coleman. One of our listeners texted in and asked a question for you, Adam. They said, ask him what it means to be a conservative to him. Pro-life, limited government, support the Second Amendment, rugged individualism, conserve what we have. How would you define a conservative, Adam?
Well, actually, very close to what this person said. Even when I was a Democrat, I was a moderate. I had no problem with people owning guns. I didn't personally own a gun, but I didn't have a problem with people owning guns. And I think that the old position of being a moderate Democrat and moderate Republican were very close to each other. Like, you kind of understood some of the positions, and maybe not everything. The only thing that I have wholly changed was I was pro-choice, and I'm wholly pro-life, and that's probably like the strongest position change that I've made within the past number of years, for a multitude of reasons. So that's why a lot of the things I write about, family, fatherhood, children, because I understand how important it is for our society. And then when I see one political party like Stacey Abrams, who I think has become the anti-NATO candidate, who is talking about abortion in the same way about leasing a vehicle, about the economics of abortion, something about that is extremely dehumanizing. And I don't know why anybody would support something like that. And that is how far left and how far crazy, where a mainstream politician, or she's not in office, but a mainstream candidate, let's just say, is advocating for the stuff that we would have thought was insane 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, Adam, we're speaking to Adam Coleman, if you're just tuning into the morning show here. One of our listeners texted in. They were talking about this conversation we've been having this morning about the Atlantic author who called for a general pandemic amnesty for things that were said and done during the pandemic. I know that yesterday you tweeted something about that one, but you were generally, righteously indignant at the concept, the idea that we might offer some kind of an amnesty to the left for all of the ills that they committed during the pandemic. And I've been sort of playing devil's advocate a little bit on this morning. And, one of our listeners texted in and said, if you don't allow people to apologize when they are wrong, then they have no incentive to admit when they are wrong. And we'll just get more of the doubling down that so many of them did throughout the pandemic. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's the problem. They're not apologizing. What that article is basically saying is let bygones be bygones and move on. Right. And that's not an apology. And you don't just get amnesty just because you think you should get amnesty. And that's my problem with it. I am a Christian. I understand people want second chances. But from the media, the same media that said, I want grandma to die, the same media that said I'm a conspiracy theorist, the same media that did everything possible to slander me, the same media that advocated for the government to do something about misinformation so we couldn't question anything, the same left-wing government that went to OSHA and tried to enforce a needle into my arm or else I get constant testing. These are the same people who are now saying, oh, hey, listen, we got caught up. hey, forgive us. Like they just had a drunk night the night before and they just lost their mind a little bit. Hey, let's just move on. that's not where we're at, because I'll tell you this, I lost someone close to me because they got the booster, and then 2 weeks later, they're fighting a blood clot near their heart and they died. They forced my wife to get a jab, or else she loses her job in New York City. This is personal to me. And for someone to say, oh, well, just let it go, let's forget. I remember the same people who used to use, I know someone who died from COVID as a legitimization for everything that happened. But we're not allowed to say, I know someone who died from the vaccine as a legitimization to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't push this on everybody. So yeah, I have as you can hear in my voice, I have a big problem with the idea of just complete amnesty.
Well, I certainly think that a lot of my listeners and viewers would agree with you, Adam. Is there anything else that you think my listeners should know before I let you go? Anything that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, definitely check out my Substack, adambcoleman.substack.com. Also check out WrongSpeak Substack, wrongspeak.substack.com. We're doing everything possible to push narratives that are counter-narrative and just advocate for freedom of speech for people to express themselves. So we take submissions for WrongSpeak, so definitely check us out. And generally speaking, I'm going to be all over the place. I'm going to be in London. Actually, I'm leaving tonight to be on trigonometry and to do some press out there. I'll be at America Fest this December at a table, so stop by. So yeah, I'm just trying to be everywhere.
That sounds great. And it looks like from the feedback that I'm getting from the audience over in the comments that they really loved the interview. They said, Adam is very good. Great interview. Bring him back. Adam Coleman, thank you very much for your time today. We're delighted to have you on the program.
Thank you. Anytime.
Thank you. Safe travels. Did you like Adam Coleman? Send us a text, 573-319-1586. Yeah, I really enjoyed that interview. What about you? We'll be back, and I think we should probably dissect that interview a little bit more. Don't forget, we have also got Camelia Peterson coming up in just a few minutes. We're going to talk to her a little bit more about this pandemic amnesty stuff and why she, as a libertarian Republican, did not vote to legalize weed here in the state of Missouri. What is going on with these libertarians? We'll be back with more of the Wake Up America Show at wakeupamericashow.com.
As a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun. Thank you.
Enough yet? Do facts no longer matter? Are lies to be encouraged instead of punished? This is not our inheritance. If truth no longer matters, we will not remain free for long. This is our generation's challenge, to defend our founders' hope that we the people could self-govern if we defend our right to get the facts. And right now, we're building the only defense of free people have, The facts on every politician, every position they held, every statement they've made, every vote they've made, and any cash they've taken. It's the real history on those now pandering for your vote. There are hundreds of young people building our defense right now, and they need your help. We all have our passions, but as our ancestors knew, when events become so foul they threaten us all, we must stand and defend each other. Please, have our backs. Join us at votesmart.org.
What would happen if I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors? What would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? So you can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be. There is no typical firefighter.
We wish you a freedom Christmas. We wish you a freedom Christmas. We wish you a freedom Christmas and a liberty New Year. Socialists and commies may try to convince you that the holiday's all about free stuff. But let's be honest, we all know whose wallet Santa's gifts are coming out of. There ain't no such thing as a free stocking. Santa is the only guy with a big white beard promising free stuff that we want anything to do with this holiday. And if you don't believe, you don't receive. It's a capitalist, consumerist holiday, and it's time for a Santa-sized stimulus. Get your free market merch at the AP for Liberty shop today and stuff your socialist sisters' stockings full of capitalist cheer. Ho, 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 ho! Good morning. It's 7:54. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Boy, this has been a great topic of discussion this morning. The whole question of a pandemic amnesty. Oh, looks like somebody saw. We had a new commercial this morning. That's right. It's no longer Halloween. I'm asking all of our listeners to check out the AP for Liberty shop. We've got a new Christmas collection up there. All kinds of awesome Liberty merch. Thank you so much. Oh, it's Steffi, my wife. I didn't see who it was. Of course, she's my biggest fan. Thank you, Steffi. We appreciate you very much. All right, so I want to switch over to my Twitter scene because I saw this discussion. Camellia sent me this one yesterday. This is David French talking about Christianity and the difference between liberty and power. And I think that this is a really good discussion, especially in light of the conversation we're having surrounding a general pandemic amnesty. Let's take a listen to what David French has to say about the discussion between liberty and power. Take a listen to this. Hit the play button.
2006, when I joined ADF, we sat down and we had a high-level strategic meeting about what are our core goals of litigating religious freedom in the United States. And a lot of people don't know this, but even going back into the late 90s and early 2000s, a lot of legal doctrines that we think of now as quite settled were not settled. Okay, so in the early 1990s, for example, there were very few cases challenging speech codes on university campuses, and there was an argument that speech codes were lawful and legal, and now we know that that's just completely wrong legally. And so in the late 90s and early 2000s, we put together a list of this. We want to secure this religious liberty objective, this religious liberty objective, this. And by golly, by God's grace, we did it. You know, if you look at the history of religious liberty litigation in the United States, it's been more than 10 years since there's been an actual meaningful religious liberty loss at the Supreme Court. Most of the wins are 9-0, 7-2. And so you hit all of these marks to say to this America's people of faith, you have freedom secured by law to a greater degree than it has ever been secured by law in the history of the United States. That is a true statement. Right now, people of faith enjoy greater freedom from government censorship and restriction than they've ever enjoyed in the history of the United States. And so naive me turns around, after 15 years of litigation is, You're welcome. And
take a victory lap, David French.
Thank you. No, thinking that we would have accomplished something really material to make people feel more sort of secure in this place in the country. Do people feel more secure? No, absolutely not. And while I think the fight for liberty is very important because it's just a matter of our fundamental American social compact, it's a matter of legal equality and what it means to be free. So I think all of those legal doctrines were important to establish as a matter of just pure justice. What was driving evangelical anxiety wasn't really the loss of liberty, it was the loss of power. You often experience power as freedom because who's going to tell the king no, right? But if you're not the king, you don't have freedom. Liberty is what you exercise against power. So you have liberty if the king says to you no, and you get to say yes. That's what liberty is.
Correct.
And so what was happening is there were a lot of concerns being voiced about religious liberty that were taken care of. But the loss of cultural power was a source of an enormous amount of anxiety. Mm-hmm. And so what then ends up happening is a lot of people now approach the Christian community and they essentially say, I'm going to, if with enough recovered power, we can make sure that you don't experience this anxiety. Mm. And so what that does is it creates a paradigm, as you were saying, like anxiety is describing an experience of something you go through. It's an inevitable part of human existence.
I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Inevitable part in many ways of being in a pluralistic society.
Send us a text.
You're always going to be surrounded by people who just
573-319-1586. Love to hear your thoughts on that one. 573-319-1586. Little D Trucking says, did that commercial just call me a hoe? Well, it said it was Santa saying, ho, 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 ho. I'll leave that up to your imagination. When we get back, we'll talk to Camelia Peterson about why that libertarian Republican voted no to legalize weed in the state of Missouri. You traitor, you statist, you authoritarian. We'll be back with more of the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Hello, my name is Kelvin. Welcome to Frenchy Bush. This is my Didi's website. Now I've decided to speak to you with my real voice for the first time ever to tell you about how cool Frenchy Bush is. But I've decided that this is the perfect opportunity to share with you. Frenchy Bush is a good website. You should follow us on socials. If you like Frenchies or any kind of bulldogs, me and my new brother George are going to try to make your life more fun.
Hello, I'm George. My neck isn't really thick yet, but it will be. We are so glad you're here. Please ignore my floating eyeball. It helps me spot predators who might be approaching from the sides.
Didi made Frenchy bullshit to review things that he uses on me and my brother to tell you if it's good or bullshit. Take this collar, for example. Didi really likes it. Didi said it's really handy because us Frenchies got thick necks. Need something really tough. People think Frenchies are little, but if you look at us from below, you can see we are really pretty buff. Beefcake. Yes. Look at my creamy thighs and chest. Yes. You like that?
Big brother, please focus.
Frenchy Bush. Please follow us for more great content and read the Frenchy Bush blog for more fun and cool stuff.
I'm a public defender.
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every dollar we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's Promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's Promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble only.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Ever hear the one about the frog? Put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump right out.
Here's my resume again.
But put a frog in a pot of cool water and slowly heat it up, and that frog will boil. It's a lie. But as a metaphor for us and all that we go through as veterans,
The real-world experience.
it's a story that rings true. We make excuses for how we feel. We push everything down. We tell ourselves the lie that it's easier to stay in that boiling water, to disconnect. And some days, maybe it is. But you've never been interested in easy. Make no mistake, reaching out is hard. Do it anyway.
I need help.
You're not alone. You've got this. You are not a frog.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
During last Friday's afternoon news dump, it was announced that President Joe Biden's administration had extended the COVID-19 national emergency, despite the president's recent declaration that, quote, the pandemic is over. This national emergency was first declared by President Donald Trump in January 2020 and has been renewed every 90 days since. This makes the 40th ongoing national emergency, and the oldest one of these is related to the 1979 Iran hostage crisis. When the president declares a national emergency, it grants him broad authority to respond to that emergency, such as things like managing means of production, in this case, vaccines and N95 mask manufacturing, as well as other things like sending military troops abroad and other extreme actions like instituting martial law, controlling transportation, and even communication. You'll remember President Trump stirred a controversy over this in recent years when he used his emergency powers to redirect billions of taxpayer dollars to help build the wall at the southern border after Congress declined his request to include the money in a government funding bill. The federal government has confirmed a nationwide shortage of Adderall, months after nearly 2/3 of community pharmacies reported that they were having trouble filling prescriptions. And despite this shortage, the federal government also indicates that it will not raise the drug's production quota for next year. In case you didn't already know, Adderall is a federally controlled substance because of its potential for abuse, and patients in most states can only pick up 1 month's supply at a time, and generally can only do so a few days before their previous prescription runs out. In response to the current shortage, the Food and Drug Administration has recommended that patients speak with their providers about finding alternative methods for treatment. The Drug Enforcement Agency, more commonly referred to as the DEA, every year sets up a production quota for Adderall to establish the quantities made for medical, scientific, and industrial use. Prescriptions for Adderall last year were up 10.4% compared to 2020. Between then and now, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, officials had relaxed federal rules that had required traditional in-person examinations before the prescription of addictive drugs like Adderall and Xanax. And in response to these rule changes, there was a boom in telehealth startup apps that were designed to streamline this relationship between remote providers and their patients. One of these popular telehealth apps, known as Cerebral Inc., is now under federal investigation for deceptive and unfair advertising and marketing practices after the Federal Trade Commission announced that it was stepping up enforcement against companies that, quote, trick or trap consumers into subscription services.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. It's 8:07. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. Glad to have you here. All right. So why are so many of my liberty friends saying, Austin, don't vote to legalize marijuana here in the state of Missouri? My friend who I trusted to fight for freedom just showed me a picture of her ballot. She voted no to legalize pot here in the state of Mo. Ho, 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 ho. Let's talk to Camelia Peterson, who's joining us now on the phone. Good morning, CJ. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty well. Thank you.
Glad to have you here. So you voted no to legalize pot. You're statist, authoritarian tyrant.
I did, although I like to think I did so in defense of liberty.
Oh, really? Well, let's hear about it then. Why?
Well, I know we have kind of talked ad nauseum about all of the reasons why this amendment for legalization is bad. It is, monopolistic. It really discriminates against minorities in a lot of ways. It creates a new felony, and it puts it all in the Constitution. There's a lot of other things that it does. It's 39 pages long, for Pete's sake. And it says it does expungement, although I'm not sure that it's really very good expungement. But it also does things like creates an equity officer to kind of make sure that these micro businesses get handed to the right people. But it also gives that equity officer some pretty broad, vague powers. And so it's cleverly written, I think, in order to allow for there to be a lot of manipulation in the future. And I think, that short-term gain of liberty and being able to legalize marijuana right now in the long term will be far more detrimental to liberty, because I talk to people who say, well, this is as good as we're going to get, and the legislature is not going to do anything about it. So we need to do this, and we can always go back and fix this, by, in the Constitution again. And I'm like, no, you can't. It's just not that easy. It's hard enough to do it right now. And, one of the things that people are working on in Missouri is making that initiative petition process even more difficult, which has some good sides to it. But at the same time, it will make it much more difficult to fix these kind of things when we all of a sudden figure out that, oh, look, it's really not so good after all.
If you're just tuning in, we're speaking to Camelia Peterson. She's the editor of the libertarianrepublic.com, and we're talking to her about why she voted no to legalize marijuana here in the state of Missouri. CJ, would you say that the campaigners to legalize it have got more momentum behind them, or the people who are fighting against the amendment? Because of the circles that I run in, all I hear from are the vote no on three people. But have you been able to see or hear? I know that you're a big door knocker, so would you say that the mojo is behind the people who are going to vote to legalize it? Do you think this passes?
I'm a little unsure how to predict whether or not it will pass. I really am hoping that it's not, but the reality is that the pro Amendment 3 people, Legal Mo, whatever it's called, they've got a ton of money behind this. I mean, millions. I just saw a report come out from the filings from last night for the MEC reports, and I think that 1.3 million is what they have raised and put into this so far. And so the anti-Amendment 3 people are very much outspent. But I will say our friend Ethan Thampy has been crisscrossing the state like nobody else, talking to groups about this. And this, I think the challenge is that there are a ton of grassroots groups and Republican groups who have taken this up and have really made it one of their top issues. And for all of the right reasons. Now, a lot of them, they're also taking it up because they're just kind of anti-legalization to begin with. But I think the good part of it is they're also seeing what the downsides are into putting into the Constitution. And I think that Republicans in general are a lot more amenable to legalization. And I think that there was enough momentum with it in the legislature last session that we have a fair shot at. I think a lot of the legislators have opened their eyes to, even though they don't personally agree with it, they know it's coming. And if they want to be able to make sure that it's done right and, with at least some semblance of free market capitalism, that they need to do something because, they need to be able to change it to make the corrections that may be needed.
That's a really good point. Do you buy into the conspiracy theories that the people who are putting this on the ballot are just doing so that they can enrich themselves?
I'm not so sure that's just a conspiracy. I mean, with the way that the medical marijuana, was passed, I mean, it's already pretty monopolistic. It was at the time, 2 years ago, it was the least bad option of 4 of them on the ballot. And so this really just kind of, they have a lot of incentive to do this because they've created a good business with the medical marijuana side of things. And the companies that are invested in that medical marijuana are the ones who are going to be benefiting from this.
Camelia, let's go to the main thrust of the topic that we've been discussing today, this question about a pandemic amnesty and the question of revenge versus justice. Can you kind of see what I'm saying here and the point that I'm making and talking about? I won't say necessarily, that we need to have some kind of an amnesty, but I think that it's a positive thing that some on the left are admitting that they were wrong about things like school closures and wearing masks outdoors, don't you?
Yes. I think that we need to be open to reconciliation. And I totally understand the point that they haven't apologized. They haven't acknowledged the error of their ways in a lot of cases. Some of them have. I know when Jake Tapper came out a week or two ago and said, I'm kind of surprised we're not having a national conversation about the impact that all of these shutdown of schools was having. And it just made me want to scream because I'm like, some of us have been having that conversation for a long time now.
Right.
But, we need to reinforce and acknowledge when somebody comes forward and finally sees the light rather than beating them up for it.
Yeah, I agree, and it's interesting to me, Camelia, that there are so many on the right who are so quick to say that we need to call for peace talks in Ukraine and Russia, but they don't offer that kind of amnesty to people here domestically. Have you noticed that?
Yes, and to your point about that both sides have made a lot of mistakes and have done things wrong. In the beginning, obviously the left made a ton of mistakes and they were talking about, and the science in the beginning, even from the CDC said, the schools need better ventilation and that would be the single best thing they could do for schools and that would make them a whole lot safer. And they gave schools tons of money. And how many schools do you think updated and upgraded their ventilation systems? Hardly any. So there were stupid things like that. But then on the other end of things, I'm talking to people on the right who are now convinced that the COVID vaccine does all of these crazy things. And we're talking about, shedding. And I had a lady, tell me once that if her eyes were looking different directions, it's because she stood next to somebody who had COVID. And I just it's craziness on both sides. And
Right. Now, it's
in the middle,
right? And it's not to say that the things that the left did weren't far worse, right? Because no matter how
absolutely,
no matter whether you're a vaxxer or an anti-vaxxer or however you feel about vaccines or politically neutral, the crime to me was wanting to make it mandatory, like firing people from their jobs, right? And New York recently had to rehire people that with back pay that they wrongfully terminated. Think about all the people that were kicked out of the military for this, right?
Yep.
When it's an experimental vaccine, it should absolutely be voluntary. And that's why, the libertarian position, I think, is ultimately the correct one because it allows for freedom of choice in so many of these situations. But the problem is that, and this is just going to, I shouldn't be saying this. I should only tell people what they want to hear. I should learn my lessons, Camelia. But the problem is that right-wingers didn't accept the private property. They believe in private property for their own religious liberty. When they want to deny, homosexuals a wedding cake, then it's private property. But when a business owner wants to fire someone because they want their employees to be vaccinated, then all of a sudden the conservatives don't believe in private property, and therein lies their own hypocrisy.
Right. And I think that this is kind of the distinction with when we talk about justice in terms of what's happened with all of the shutdowns and things like that. In New York, they had those employees got back pay, right? So I think that is justice, because anytime the government is taking a hand in it and doing harm, that's why I wasn't really opposed to them handing out money to some of the businesses, because they forced those businesses to close down and lose business. So I think that, there was some justice in that, and that there was an obligation on the government's part. But I think it's totally different when you're talking about private businesses. Now, it's going to get messy, because there is no way that we're ever going to realistically get perfect justice from any of this. Somebody's going to be unhappy, and there's no way around that. And, I have friends who tell me all the time, not just about the COVID stuff, but about all of these other crazy things that are going on right now, that there is no compromise. There is no talking or reasoning with the left, that we have to crush them and destroy them. And that is the only way that we're going to get, a free culture back. But the thing is, how do you do that? I mean, what does that mean? Because this is like nearly half the country, and you can't just crush and destroy them. If you're going to do anything, you've got to also be changing hearts and minds.
For sure. And I think if anything, the real enemy is China. The people who did this to us, we do have an actual enemy in this, and we still haven't gotten to the bottom of whether or not this was unleashed on us by accident or by deliberate act, which is in itself an actual act of war. Camelia, this is such a good conversation. I'm glad we're having it this morning, and this topic really was a godsend in terms of, content this morning, because I'm getting a lot of texts about it. I'm going to let you go. I'll read some of these texts, and I just want to say thank you so much for your time, Camelia. Awesome as always. Thank you for your coming on the show today.
Have a great Tuesday.
We'll talk to you on Thursday. That's right, Camelia Peterson. What did you think? Send us a text, 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586 with your thoughts on that one. Okay, let's transition. What do you say? Tali Owen says, if I accept any show of humility, praying daily, I stay humble as well. However, when it comes to governments and people in power, there must be accountability. I think I agree with you, Tali. That's good stuff. All right, what do you think? Don't forget, we got Jon Miltimore at 8:35. If you had a time travel device and could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, would you do it? Man, killing baby Hitler, talking about vaccines and anti-vaxxers. I'm surprised that this show has not been pulled off social media yet. Maybe it will be. And next, can you get ahead and still have a life? What about careerism? What about a family? Can you have it all? We'll talk about all that and more when we get back on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here. And we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Wife. I want to thank you all for watching the Wake Up America Show with Austin Peterson. This show has been a huge venture for our family, so we would love it if you could join us.
I believe in liberty, and I believe in Austin's ability to spread the ideas of liberty. Do you?
I want to ask ask you today to join Peterson's Patriots with a pledge of $17.76 a month. Help us to stay cancel-proof so we can spread the message of limited government across the country. I joined Peterson's Patriots myself, just in a little different way. Visit wakeupAmericaShow.com/support and make your pledge today.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
Speaker Pelosi's husband, Paul, made a big investment in chips just before Congress votes on a bill that would give $52 billion in subsidies and tax credits to the chip industry.
Over the course of your career, has your husband ever made a stock purchase or sale based on information he received from you? No.
And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back. Do not come. Do not come.
Have you ever received a royalty payment from a company that you later oversaw money going to that company? You know, I don't know as a fact, but I doubt it. Well, here's the thing is, why don't you let us know?
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. It's Austin Peterson. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching and listening to the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. All right. The listeners have been sending in texts all morning. It's been a great discussion about this whole pandemic amnesty, and I really like what I'm hearing from people. I mean, it's pretty well balanced, the opinions on both sides. One listener texted in this morning and said that first we need answers. Where did this virus originate? I think that's a great question. And then they continued on saying they were admitting, the left was admitting that they were gullible and that it's not their fault. PSYOP, bioweapon, that is huge progress. We all can get to the bottom of it together. Another listener questioned in and said, do you think that Dr. Fauci and the medical establishment needs to go to the gulag for their bad medical expertise? After a free trial, of course. Well, I happen to think that they should go to jail for what they did. And Dr. Fauci, I think, is definitely shown that he is corrupt because to me, I think much of the crime comes about with the corruption comes with the commercial that plays during the break where I produced that discussion between Senator Rand Paul and Anthony Fauci about the payments that were being made by pharmaceutical companies to people at the NIH. And then the NIH goes out and markets, essentially does the job of marketing for Big Pharma. That to me seems to be corrupt. If it's a crime, whether or not it's a crime, I don't know. That depends on whether the law has worded it as such. Not to say that it shouldn't necessarily morally be a crime, but you may not be able to convict someone if it hasn't been put on the books yet. One listener texted in this morning and says that they've got other obligations. I will have to watch the rest of your show later. They were saying that capitalism is not liberty. Yeah, I might disagree with you there, but hopefully you'll come back and we can argue about it. Another listener texted in today, said, as a former libertarian candidate, I would love to hear your take on whether it makes logistical sense to vote for big L libertarians who have no chance of winning, whether they have no chance of winning and to take votes away from Republicans who do have a chance to win. I was just thinking about this yesterday because I voted and saw all these libertarian candidates on the ballot I had never heard of before. I consider myself libertarian, but voted straight Republican because I want my vote to count towards beating the Democrats, not helping take votes away from their strongest competition. There's certainly a lot of libertarian candidates who would hear you say that, would probably complain. But unfortunately, because of the two-party system that we exist under today, and because of the way our voting system works, you are right to a certain extent. The problem is that, just to assume that somebody is better based on their party affiliation might be a false assumption, probably is a false assumption. And I'll say that even applies to libertarians when you consider that there are plenty of libertarian candidates who are actually terrible candidates and don't deserve your vote. Just because they decide to run under a libertarian party ballot line doesn't make them good candidates. I can tell you, there are plenty of people who have run as libertarians that I would never vote for. And so I would say to you that, really what you need to do is you need to spend time before you go to the ballot box, and you need to research the individual candidates themselves and vote based on what you think is the right thing for your community, for your representative. If you're just voting to beat the Democrats, I can understand that, because as bad as the Democrats have been, especially during the pandemic, wanting to get them out of office, I think, is a good thing. And, getting them out of office ultimately would be a good thing. But I'll say that probably the proper, moral, and correct and upright thing to do is to research each candidate specifically and vote for the ones that you think would be the best. All right. So coming up next, Jon Miltimore from the Foundation for Economic Education is going to join us on the show. And he's going to give us an answer to the age-old question. If you had a time machine, you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler. Would you do it? Send me a text, yes or no. Would you do it? Would you kill baby Hitler? Possibly prevent war in Europe? Let me know. Send us a text, 573-319-1586, and we'll be back with more of the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Hello, my name is Kelvin. Welcome to Frenchy Bush. This is my Didi's website. Now I've decided to speak to you with my real voice for the first time ever to tell you about how cool Frenchy Bush is. But I've decided that this is the perfect opportunity to share with you. Frenchy Bush is a good website. You should follow us on socials. If you like Frenchies or any kind of bulldogs, me and my new brother George are going to try to make your life more fun.
Hello, I'm George. My neck isn't really thick yet, but it will be. We are so glad you're here. Please ignore my floating eyeball. It helps me spot predators who might be approaching from the sides.
Didi made Frenchy bullshit to review things that he uses on me and my brother to tell you if it's good or bullshit. Take this collar, for example. Didi really likes it. Didi said it's really handy because us Frenchies got thick necks. Need something really tough. People think Frenchies are little, but if you look at us from below, you can see we are really pretty buff. Beefcake. Yes. Look at my creamy thighs and chest. Yes. You like that?
Big brother, please focus.
Frenchy Bush. Please follow us for more great content and read the Frenchy Bush blog for more fun and cool stuff.
I'm a public defender.
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every dollar we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's Promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's Promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble only.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Ever hear the one about the frog? Put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump right out.
Here's my resume again.
But put a frog in a pot of cool water and slowly heat it up, and that frog will boil. It's a lie. But as a metaphor for us and all that we go through as veterans,
Do you have any real-world experience?
it's a story that rings true. We make excuses for how we feel. We push everything down. We tell ourselves the lie that it's easier to stay in that boiling water, to disconnect. And some days, maybe it is. But you've never been interested in easy. Make no mistake, reaching out is hard. Do it anyway. You're not alone. You've got this. You are not a frog.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson, and you're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupamericashow.com. All right, the question of the ages. If you had a time machine and you could go back in history and kill baby Hitler, stab him right in the heart, possibly even prevent war in Europe, the greatest war of all time, would you do it? The man who asked that question and answered it is the managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. He's Jon Miltimore. He's a regular guest, and he's joining us on the show right now. Good morning, Jon. Thanks for coming on. And what the hell is wrong with you? Why are you asking about killing babies?
It's funny. Oftentimes, I can look back and see why I decided to write something. I don't even know why that one popped up on my radar. It's one of those, every few years we get in this big discussion, right? Like when I wrote the piece, I looked back. There was a fury of discussion in 2015. There was, a whole bunch in 2019 when Ben Shapiro brought it up at a pro-life rally. It's kind of an intriguing question, right? And I don't know if listeners saw it, but I remember this Twilight Zone episode, not in the original, and I'm a big fan of the original Twilight Zone, but this was in one of the reboots during the early 2000s. And there was an episode called Cradle of Darkness, where they kind of wrestle with this question. The episode is worth watching. It's got a young Katherine Hagel in it, and she's whisked back in time as a nanny for baby Hitler, and she has to wrestle with this question: do I kill? And she's sent back to kill Hitler. She's like, when she goes back, she's like, well, of course I'm going to do it. She finds out it's a little harder to do it than she thought, and that brings a certain human element into this. It's not like the trolley problem, right, where you flip a switch. And the trolley, for people who don't know, the trolley problem says you're going to save more lives by flipping the switch. Over here, it's just going to kill one person, where it was on a track to kill 10. Okay, this you have to actually kill someone. Like, could you kill baby Hitler? And for me, the answer, I don't remember when I figured this out, but the answer is clearly no. You can't just kill a baby.
How dare that's anti-Semitic, Jon.
And it's really controversial it's funny because the New York Times Magazine polled people, only 30% said no. Only 30% said no, murder is wrong. But I think the ethics of this, the larger ethics, here's where I think it's interesting. It's really an important exercise to find out what you think and why you think what you think. And there is, once you start to rationalize doing an evil deed, there's a very slippery slope there. And I know people will say, "Oh, it's a slippery slope analogy," but it's one of the things I think libertarians are really good about. They look at things, they say that is right and that is wrong, and you don't commit evil in the hope that it might achieve some greater good. And I think if you look systems historically that do that, really bad things end up happening.
No, that's the moral argument for why you shouldn't kill baby Hitler, but there's plenty of utilitarian arguments for why you shouldn't do it, and people have laid it out for years. The idea is, Hitler was a terrible commander. He was crazy. He was on drugs, and there are people who said that it was probably a good idea that the Operation Valkyrie, the attempt to try and assassinate Hitler, a good idea that didn't succeed because Hitler was responsible for the blunders that led to the hastening of the end of the war.
There are some good utilitarian arguments out there as well. Like the one people keep bringing up to me is the space-time continuum. Like, you're going to wreck it that way. And do you really know this is going to save lives? And so, some of those questions are asked. I'm not a utilitarianist, and I think it's a lousy philosophy. I think when you take it to its logical extension, it really falls apart quickly. This came up on a call we had with Hazlitt Fellows, and they've had some just brilliant dialogue on bad utilitarian arguments. So I prefer a moral one. Like, I think humans they know right from wrong. We know it's not good to kill people, to murder people, right? Like, it's one thing if you're defending yourself, different circumstance. We know it's not good to take people's stuff, right? But we rationalize doing it. We rationalize saying, well, we're going to take this from you. Well, it's not really me taking it; it's the government taking it. And okay, they're taking it, but they're going to do some really good things with it. Look at all the things they're going to do, and all of the intentions that they have. It all falls apart. And this was sort of what the episode went into. I don't want to spoil it for people that want to go back and watch it, but things don't turn out as planned. We'll say that. And that's the thing. We declared war on poverty with this mindset, right? Like, we're sure it's going to be some pain. We're going to have to take a lot more of your stuff, but it's going to be really good. Like, we are going to eradicate poverty. Well, if you look, the poverty rate has barely budged since 1965. It has. If you look at the decades prior to that, poverty was falling precipitously. But we declared war on poverty. We're going to really get rid of it. Then the poverty rate was 14%. Today it's around 12%. Like all of those intentions. What did we achieve with that? Well, a lot of things happened on the way there. It didn't go as planned, and that's what I was really hoping people would take from that article.
Well, what about you? If you are listening in, we're just speaking to Jon Miltimore. He's the managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. You can send us a text at 573-319-1586. If you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, would you do it? I'd love to hear from you on that one. But speaking of Hitler and the Treaty of Versailles, we were discussing this morning this Atlantic piece that you and I mentioned briefly during the commercial break about the left calling for a sort of general pandemic amnesty. And the way that I sort of likened it is to sort of like the difference between the Treaty of Versailles and the Marshall Plan. Now, I know libertarians aren't big fans of government spending, and plenty of libertarian critiques of the Marshall Plan exist, probably a few on the Foundation for Economic Education's website. But I would argue that the Marshall Plan was a much superior approach than the Treaty of Versailles was, because I think the Treaty of Versailles directly led to more war and led to the rise of Adolf Hitler. So then why shouldn't we say that there should be some kind of a forgiveness or some kind of a general amnesty when it comes to how we treated one another during the pandemic, John?
Yeah, I think something like that, if it's done the right way, can be constructive. And I was having a conversation with a different radio guy on Twitter about this morning, because I pointed out that I think an amnesty is a terrible idea if it really means sweeping what we did under the rug and not having taking a retroactive look at this and saying, wow, we really screwed some things up. Because ultimately we need to look at this and figure out what we did wrong. And we did a lot of things wrong. Now, I'm not somebody, there's a lot of chatter like, put him in prison or like all that. That's not, I don't think that dialogue is going to be helpful. I think what you did have was a lot of people that were doing what they thought was best in good faith. I don't think that chatter is helpful. But that said, we need to have a hard look at this and look, why did we make these decisions on, like, who really had authority here? Dr. Fauci, how did he become the national spokesman? Like he was not, NIH, which Fauci, falls under that umbrella. They weren't supposed to be making public policy like this. I was at a conference in DC with a lot of public, health officials, a lot of physicians, a lot of people who were marginalized during these debates. And they said that was like one of the biggest problems and something nobody ever asks. Like Fauci wasn't head of the CDC. Like he was supposed to be producing good science. And then the public health officials take that and they look at it and then they make decisions. Well, those agencies became completely blurred and those roles became blurred and it really polluted the science. And that's just one of many things I think we need to look at and have an honest assessment. So I'm all about forgiveness, but first, we need to kind of establish what's being forgiven. That's part of it.
That's a good point. Chris Morrill over on YouTube this morning says that we didn't do the Marshall Plan out of the goodness of our hearts. We needed allies against a future war with the Soviets. So in essence, he's sort of arguing the utilitarian argument. And if we could apply that utilitarian argument to this, we could say, well, we want future allies against the pandemic tyrants of the future. So we have a general amnesty now for those who wish to have it, surrender, come in and say that you are sorry for everything that you did during the pandemic. And then we can use those people for our future war against, the pandemic tyrants of the future then, right?
It's a very Machiavellian answer. And that's not always bad, right? Like there's a great thing in Game of Thrones when Tywin Lannister is kind of coaching Joffrey. And he says, I don't remember if this was in the books or in the show, but he said, if you don't forgive people, they'll never bend the knee. And he said, that's sort of part of the forgiveness. It's a very Machiavellian answer. He's not doing
but it's true.
The right thing to do. He's saying it's constructive. Yes, absolutely.
But it's true. It's like when you're in a war, for example, if your enemy thinks that you will fight to the death and that there is no forgiveness, if your enemy thinks that that believes that you will take no prisoners, they will fight as if they're on death's ground, because they are on death's ground. So, I mean, not only is it a moral good to have a sense of forgiveness, but it's also tactically an important thing that your enemy believes that they can have forgiveness, correct?
Yeah, no, I think that is true. And again, I think having just good dialogue on this and is really important. And I think that's, let's assume that Republicans retake, the House or maybe the Senate. I think having hearings on this is going to be helpful. Now, again, I think we should do that with an olive branch, right? And not just assume that people were doing this from malfeasance or ill intentions. But I do want answers, and I want to figure out, where the virus came from and why was government, coordinating with these agencies. And amnesty is not the same thing as sweeping everything under the rug. If it's the latter, I'm opposed to that. I don't want to just forgive and forget. I think we need to figure out why this went wrong. Otherwise, the next crisis, the exact same thing is going to happen. We're going to have all the same panic and all these, same people that making these decisions. You can't have all this power and no accountability, right? That is a dangerous recipe. There needs to be some kind of accountability as well.
Yep, I think I completely agree, John. And boy, but it is a really good conversation. I think that this is a great piece. And in it, she did actually acknowledge that she was wrong about school closures and about things like wearing masks outdoors while you're hiking. But I wish that there were more on the left who were acknowledging the same things that she was. So, if more people on the left were saying these kinds of things, maybe more people's attitudes would change. John, is there anything else that you think people should know before I let you go?
Not really. I'll just echo. I'm with you. This came up with the CNN commentator, Miss Wen, I forget her first name, who kind of walked back. Like she learned from her child suffered from the mask mandates. I don't want to berate those people and say that you caused it. And say we should look at this and learn from it. And people like Emily at the Atlantic, I think she was very early on. She kind of realized wow, a lot of this isn't helping, and we need people like that, right? She's an economist at Brown University. She knows her stuff, and I think those people should be welcomed with open arms, even if they got some stuff wrong early on. I'm with you there. Other than that,
I guess what would Jesus do?
There would be absolutely an element of forgiveness there. And I'll just close on this. We will have a piece out later this week on this. One of our old Hazlitt fellows, Jack Elbaum, is writing something on this front. So that should be out in a day or two. So you can see our take on fee.org over there.
Yeah. Oh, this is a great conversation. I love it. We're definitely going to continue it with our listeners when I read your text messages in the chat. Jon Miltimore, managing editor of the Foundation for Economic Education. Thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate you.
Always a pleasure, Austin. Take care.
It's always important to understand why, if you had a time machine, you wouldn't want to go back and kill baby Hitler. It's all these hard-hitting topics that we have here on the morning show. The Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. We'll be back with more. One more segment to go.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun. Thank you.
Had enough yet? Do facts no longer matter? Are lies to be encouraged instead of punished? This is not our inheritance. If truth no longer matters, we will not remain free for long. This is our generation's challenge, to defend our founders' hope that we the people could self-govern if we defend our right to get the facts. And right now, we're building the only defense of free people have, the facts on every politician, every position they held, every statement they've made, every vote they've made, and any cash they've taken. It's the real history on those now pandering for your vote. There are hundreds of young people building our defense right now, and they need your help. We all have our passions, but as our ancestors knew, when events become so foul they threaten us all, we must stand and defend each other. Please, have our backs. Join us at votesmart.org.
What would happen if I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors? What would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? So you can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be. There is no typical firefighter.
We wish you a freedom Christmas. We wish you a freedom Christmas. We wish you a freedom Christmas and a liberty New Year. Socialists and commies may try to convince you that the holiday's all about free stuff. But let's be honest, we all know whose wallet Santa's gifts are coming out of. There ain't no such thing as a free stocking. Santa is the only guy with a big white beard promising free stuff that we want anything to do with this holiday. And if you don't believe, you don't can't receive. It's a capitalist, consumerist holiday, and it's time for a Santa-sized stimulus. Get your free market merch at the AP for Liberty shop today and stuff your socialist sisters' stockings full of capitalist cheer. Ho, 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 ho!
During last Friday's afternoon news dump, it was announced that President Joe Biden's administration had extended the COVID-19 national emergency, despite the president's recent declaration that, quote, the pandemic is over. This national emergency was first declared by President Donald Trump in January 2020 and has been renewed every 90 days since. This makes the 40th ongoing national emergency, and the oldest one of these is related to the 1979 Iran hostage crisis. When the president declares a national emergency, it grants him broad authority to respond to that emergency, such as things like managing means of production, in this case, vaccines and N95 mask manufacturing, as well as other things like sending military troops abroad and other extreme actions like instituting martial law, controlling transportation, and even communication. You'll remember President Trump stirred a controversy over this in recent years when he used his emergency powers to
Good morning, it's 8:53. You are watching and listening to the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson at wakeupAmericaShow.com. All right, today was a great show. I love all this discussion that we've had about amnesty. The left is calling for amnesty in forgiveness for what they did during the pandemic. Personally, I think that it's a good sign. And many on the right are saying, no, absolutely not. There is no forgiveness, no amnesty for what they have done. And yet, I will say this. Many of the people who are out there saying that they cannot forgive the left, very few of those people were here standing with me in Jefferson City, arm in arm, when we marched against lockdowns in the Capitol. Very few people stood up against COVID tyranny when it began 2 years ago. There are very few people on the right who got it right from the very beginning. Governor DeSantis didn't get it right from the very beginning. The best pandemic governor in terms of how they managed their state, in terms of getting the pandemic right, was Kristi Noem of South Dakota. And yet many on the right don't hold her in the same esteem that they hold Ron DeSantis. Did you stand against tyranny from the very beginning? Did you leave your house, walk up to the Capitol in your state, and fight for freedom? If you did not, and you now declare that there should be heads rolling, think about it for a moment. Where were you when the fight for freedom began? Were you on the front lines? I was. I was there. Some of you were there with me, but not many. And if you were there and you believe that there should be no amnesty, no forgiveness, no concept of forgiveness for your opponents in this, if you were there, then I can respect your views. But if you weren't there, if you cowered while people like myself were talking about getting rifles and standing outside churches to prevent the police officers that the conservatives worship and lick the boots of, to prevent them from shutting down churches. If you weren't there with us, please forgive me if I don't take you entirely seriously when you demand the heads of the left now. You weren't there with us. You weren't fighting from the very beginning. You were a Johnny-come-lately. And while I appreciate that you joined the army of the Republic, the rest of us who sat in Valley Forge and ate nothing but onions have a little bit more claim to speak on this topic. That's all I'm going to say on this topic. We'll move on to something tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the Wake Up America show. Happy November. I hope you have a fantastic month. I'd love to hear from you. You can always text us at 573-319-1586 because I do check those messages even when I'm not on the show. We'll see you tomorrow on the Wake Up America show at wakeupamericashow.com.
It's morning again in America. Our country is prouder and stronger and better.
I like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today.
Fire.
Your printing company stinks. They charge you too much money and they don't love America enough. We've got the solution. Patriot Printing USA. Whether you're running for office, saving souls, or just need business cards that will get you the new job you've been looking for, Patriot Printing USA has got you covered with the best prices around. Palm cards, brochures, bumper stickers, door hangers, you name it, we've got it. PatriotPrintingUSA.com. That's PatriotPrintingUSA.com.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
Average Americans are turning into conspiracy theorists at an unprecedented rate. Flip City Magazine was created for new converts to aid in their in-depth research along the path of absolute truth. We offer the hardest-hitting news and opinion delivered uncensored in print directly to your door. Display proudly on your coffee table or hide discreetly under your mattress. Flip City is the magazine they don't want you to see, much less read. Subscribe to Flip City Magazine today at flipcitymag.com.
better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.